Hello and welcome back. The topic for this lecture is radical feminism. This is the second lecture on our block that we call sexual ethics. Now, last time we looked at modernity and post-modernity, and we saw the difference between these two perspectives. The modern perspective, which is fully founded on trust in science, and the postmodern skeptical perspective that questions everything and that sees a peculiar relationship between power and knowledge. So power really selects what parts of knowledge are going to be relevant for everyone, and then they become absolute. Remember the history book. Someone selects certain events from the past, puts them together, makes them look legitimate, and as a result of that, we have history with a capital H. Well, everything in culture has been done and is being done that way from the postmodern perspective. Those with power will create culture to their liking, to meet their needs, or their interests, or their preferences. And if you were to be a feminist woman, far more a radical feminist, you might easily come to the conclusion that, well, those in power have always been men. Therefore, society as a whole, culture as a whole, has been shaped by men to fit men's interests, not women's interests. So that men are always on top and women are always in a subservient role. Well, this is the basis, the ideological basis for radical feminism. Now, in this case, radical feminism is spelled with a capital R and with a capital F. We are not talking about feminists who happen to be very radical, but simply a name, the name of a movement, radical feminism. Whether they are truly radical or not, you don't need to concern yourselves with. I mean, you may actually determine that later. But this is the name of a movement. Let me start by making the distinction between two types of feminism, two types of feminist ideology. The feminism of difference and the feminism of non-difference. And feminism of non-difference. These two groups agree that masculinity and femininity are two cultural constructs. Meaning there are a number of behaviors and cultural forms that conform what we call masculinity and femininity. If we were to erase those behaviors, what do we call masculinity and femininity? What do you describe as masculinity? Okay, can we have the student? What do you describe as masculinity and femininity? Okay, say it relates to colors, for example. So we associate femininity with pink, or long hair, at least in old times, in the 50s, they saw long hair was a feminine thing. While men dress in blue, I mean, pink for women, blue for men. Today we don't really care that much about that. But that's the kind of thing we associate with masculine. I mean, if you look at a guy here, how do they dress? Then look at a girl. Well, some difference in there. Colors, styles, okay? Well, those are social constructs. Constructs really mean inventions, understandings, way of doing things, interpretations. That's what the word construct means. And if we were able to erase that, we would be left with what? Well, the feminists of non-difference say we would be left with two equal human beings, two equal beings. The feminists of difference say, no, we would be left with two essentially different beings. Now, the radical feminists define themselves as feminists of difference. So for them, men and women are truly, essentially different. You understand what I mean by essentially, right? It's not accidentally, essentially. We think today that all humans are the same. Some are tall, some are short, some are blonde, some are whatever, have long hair, short hair, this race, that race, or male or female. We think they are the same. There's no essential difference. But the radical feminists say, yes, there is an essential difference. Men belong to somehow a different species. Now, Andrea Dworkin is one of the main leaders of the radical feminist movement. Now, how many of you consider yourselves to be feminist in ideology? Cami, do you consider yourself to be a feminist? Come on, tell us something about your feminism. You don't need to take so many notes, not so extensively. Just a skeleton, because they have the audio. No, we risk it.
I don't have a
Okay, well, she may not be a radical feminist. Maybe she will end up being a radical feminist by the end of this class. Okay, well, let me read from Pornography, Men Possessing Women, which is like the Bible of radical feminism. It's a book by Andrea Dworkin. Dworkin died a few years ago. She was one of the leaders of the radical feminist movement, together with Catherine McKinnon, the author of Only Words, the book that you need to read for this part of the semester. So let me read from Andrea Dworkin what she calls the 7 tenets of male power. The 7 tenets. You know what the word tenet is? It means if you're taking notes, you may want to take this word, 7 tenets. Tenets is principles, basis. Let me clarify one thing in parentheses with the word principle, because I find that in your papers very often, this confusion between principle and principle. So that's a very common misspelling. You have principle and principle. I find a confusion between these two words all the time in the papers when I grade them. Principle means basis, foundation, the things upon which you establish your life, your beliefs. That's a principle. It means the beginning. Principle means the most important, the principal of a school, okay? Not to be confused. So these are the tenets, are principles in the first sense, principles. These are the tenets, 7 tenets of male supremacist ideology, as she calls them. Number 1, men have a self, and women must, by definition, lack it. So men are something, and women are just things to be used, to be shaped. But women have a self. We are something. Women are there like objects. The second tenet of male supremacist ideology is strength. Strength used over and against others less strong or without the sanction to use strength as power. The reality of male physical strength in an absolute sense is less important than the ideology that sacralizes and celebrates it. In part, the physical strength of men over women is realized because men keep women physically weak. There's this all-men conspiracy against women. So we raise girls playing with dolls so they don't get strong and they can rebel against us. That's the idea, okay? In the